The silence struck Silas Ward like a hammer blow. After 15 years of coaxing crops from stubborn soil and keeping a handful of cattle alive through droughts and floods, he knew the rhythms of his ranch as well as he knew his own heartbeat. The lowing of cows, the crow of his old rooster, the rustle of horses in their stalls. These were the sounds that framed his life. But this morning, everything was wrong. Not a bird called, not a hoof shifted, not even the rooster dared break the stillness. It was the kind of quiet that made a man's skin crawl. Silas reached for the rifle hanging by the door and moved toward the barn. The heavy oak doors groaned as he pushed them open, sunlight spilling across hay-strewn planks. He expected to find a coyote gone lame or maybe a calf trapped between bales. Instead, two shapes stirred in the far corner. Women. They were unlike any women he had ever seen. Both towered well over 6 feet, shoulders broad, their faces painted in striking patterns of black and red. Their dark eyes watched him with a mix of exhaustion and defiance. Blood stained their clothes, and their feet were wrapped in rough bandages. These were not settlers' wives lost on the prairie. These were Apache women, fugitives. The elder raised her hand slowly. "Please," she said, her English careful but accented. "We ask only shelter until nightfall. Then we will go." Before Silas could answer, the younger one grabbed his sleeve. "Listen!" At first he heard nothing. Then it came. The faint rustle of branches, the creak of leather, the quiet snorts of horses being held still. Silas froze, his chest tightening. Through the gaps in the barn wall, he spotted them, painted faces in the trees, dozens of them. Not raiders passing through. A war party. He counted as best he could. 60, maybe more. All of them watching his barn. "They followed us," the elder whispered. "We thought we lost them in the canyon, but Chief Aando's men do not give up their quarry easily." Silas's grip tightened on his rifle. "And who exactly are you?" She straightened, her presence commanding even in her battered state. "I am Ayana. This is my sister, Kiona, daughters of Chief Nalish of the White Mountain people. We are hunted because I refused Aando's marriage. He took our younger sister as hostage. When we fled, we carried proof of his betrayal, evidence of his dealings with Mexican traders. If he regains it, he will bring war to this valley." Her words chilled him. Silas had lived quietly, carving a life from land most men wouldn't touch. He never asked for trouble. Yet trouble had come to his doorstep in the form of 2 wounded women and 60 warriors sharpening their knives in the shadows. A whistle pierced the morning stillness. A signal. The women stiffened. Horses shifted. The circle outside was tightening. Silas's heart pounded as he looked from his rifle to the sisters. He could give them up, wash his hands of it, and maybe live to see another sunrise. Or he could stand with them and risk losing everything. The younger woman, Kiona, met his eyes with fierce intensity. "You're not just part of this now, rancher. You're the choice. Betray us, or prove your kindness meant something more." Silas swallowed hard. The barn suddenly felt smaller, the air heavy with the weight of destiny. He had 30 seconds to decide the course of his life. The sharp whistle faded, replaced by the steady thrum of hooves pressing closer. Silas could feel the vibration through the barn's dirt floor. Every nerve in his body screamed at him to run, to bolt the doors, to vanish into the hills. But there was no running from 60 warriors. Ayana, the elder, moved with calm authority, though her hands were bound by fatigue and blood. "If Aando believes you've captured us, he may hesitate. He wants to humiliate us, to parade us as proof of his strength. That pride can buy us time." Kiona was already moving, pulling a coil of rope from a peg on the wall. Her strong fingers wrapped the cords around Ayana's wrists with practiced efficiency. Then, with a grim smile, she tied her own. "Make it look convincing," she told Silas. "When they come through that door, you're no ally. You're a desperate settler clinging to survival." The words twisted Silas's gut. He'd never been a liar, never staged a betrayal. But the sight of shadows slipping between the trees told him this was no time for stubborn pride. Through the barn slats, he watched the warriors spread out. They moved with the precision of soldiers, forming a circle that swallowed his land whole. The painted faces, the rifles gleaming in the morning sun, the silent way they prepared. It was a noose, tightening around his life. Then the barn doors creaked open, with the slow inevitability of a gallows trap. 6 warriors entered, weapons at the ready. Behind them strode a man taller, broader, radiating command. Chief Aando. His face was marked with elaborate scars and paint, his eyes sharp as obsidian knives. He looked at the bound women first, then at Silas. "So," Aando said in perfect English, his voice deep and measured, "the settler has done my work for me." Silas forced his voice to shake. "Found them in my barn. Didn't want no trouble. Just didn't want to die." Ayando's dark gaze lingered, as if weighing the truth. The chief was younger than Silas expected, perhaps 40, but carried himself with the certainty of a man who believed the world already belonged to him. Ayana lifted her chin, her voice steady despite the ropes. "You may bind our hands, Aando, but you cannot bind the truth. We know about the rifles, the gold, the plans to drive settlers from this valley." The chief's eyes narrowed, his lips curving into a predator's smile. He signaled, and one of his men seized the bundle at Kiona's waist. Papers, a compass, scraps of evidence. Aando unfolded the documents, his expression flickering from confidence to fury. Silas stood frozen, caught between 2 worlds colliding in his barn. One wrong word could see him cut down where he stood. Yet even in that moment of danger, he understood something chilling. This wasn't just about marriage or honor. This was about power, war, and betrayal that stretched far beyond his lonely ranch. And he was standing at its center. The barn seemed to shrink under the weight of so many armed men. The smell of sweat, leather, and horses filled the air, mingling with the acrid tang of fear. Silas gripped his rifle tighter, though he knew firing it would only hasten his death. Chief Aando studied the documents in his hands. His jaw clenched, then loosened as if he were grinding down rage into cold calculation. "You speak of rifles and gold," he said, his voice like gravel. "Where did you get these papers?" Ayana's eyes burned with defiance. "From Colonel Martinez. He is dead. We carry proof of your dealings with him, and with the traitor Caldwell in Santa Fe." Ayando's warriors shifted uneasily, glancing between their chief and the sisters. Silas could feel the tension building, sharp as a blade about to snap. The words hung heavy, proof of betrayal, of collusion with enemies. If true, it wasn't just the sisters' honor at stake, but the very loyalty of every warrior in that barn. "You're bluffing," Aando spat, though his hand trembled slightly as he turned the compass over in his palm. On its back, the inscription glimmered faintly in the shaft of sunlight cutting through the slats. His eyes flickered with something Silas couldn't read. Fear, perhaps, or recognition. Kiona's voice was like steel. "If we die, copies of those papers find their way to the territorial governor. Your war will be exposed for the power grab it truly is." The chief's nostrils flared. "And what of you, settler?" His eyes pinned Silas. "Do you understand what stands before you? You could hand over these women, Prove your loyalty to the land you claim, and be rewarded. Or you could defy me and be buried before sundown." Silas's throat went dry. His entire life, 15 years of sweat poured into this soil. Every fence post, every brand on his cattle, balanced on the edge of his answer. He thought of Ruth, gone 3 winters now, of the nights he'd sat alone by the fire, wondering why he kept fighting for land that gave him so little in return. And now, 2 strangers had dragged him into a storm of politics and war he'd never asked for. Ayana spoke again, softer this time. "You once fed starving children, Silas Ward. We know because we watched. That act of kindness may yet save more than children. It may save this valley. Choose wisely." The chief's gaze bored into him, waiting. The warriors shifted, their painted faces unreadable. The air in the barn felt heavy, suffocating. Silas's fingers tightened around the rifle, then slowly loosened. He lowered it. "I don't care for politics," he said, his voice rough. "But I know when someone's fixing for blood, and I won't be part of another man's war." For the first time, something flickered across Aando's face. Surprise, maybe even respect. The silence stretched until it felt unbearable. Then, slowly, the chief tucked the compass back into the pouch and closed his fist around it. "This settler," he said at last, "may yet prove useful." The barn exhaled, though the danger had only shifted, not vanished. Dawn's light sharpened into a hard glare by mid-morning, cutting across the barnyard like a blade. Silas stood stiff on the porch, his rifle hanging at his side, while the Apache warriors ringed his ranch in absolute silence. They weren't moving, weren't threatening, but the tension was a living thing, pressing down like a storm cloud. Ayana and Kiona sat on the barn floor, still bound, their eyes sharp and unyielding despite their restraints. Aando's men had searched their bundles again, whispering among themselves about the documents and compass. The whispers carried a note of doubt, a subtle crack in the absolute loyalty that had seemed unbreakable only hours before. Chaitan, the young scout accused of betrayal, stood near the doorway, his hand never straying far from his knife. His gaze flicked constantly between his chief and the sisters, like a man watching 2 fuse lines burning toward the same keg of powder. "You cannot trust them," Aando growled, pacing before his men. His war paint glistened with sweat, his voice pitched so all could hear. "These women bring foreign tricks, promises of governors and treaties, lies to weaken us before the real battle begins." Ayana's voice cut through the barn like a bell. "If we are liars, why did you hide your meetings with Colonel Martinez? Why did you accept his weapons? Why are you so afraid of these papers?" The words rippled through the warriors like wind across tall grass. Some shifted uneasily, others looked away. Kiona's chin lifted. "You promised unity, but what you want is conquest. Even your own men begin to see it." The air snapped taut. Aando's hand closed on the haft of his tomahawk. Silas felt his heart slam against his ribs. One word, one wrong move, and the barn would become a slaughterhouse. Then, from outside, a new sound rose. A whistle. Not the sharp Apache signal he'd learned to dread, but the long, rolling call of approaching riders. Hooves pounded on the dry earth. Dust plumed over the ridgeline. Every head turned toward the noise. Aando barked an order, and half his men spilled out to the yard, weapons raised. Silas caught sight of what approached. Not warriors this time, but a small party flying a white flag. 3 riders, dressed in the plain but formal clothes of territorial officials. His breath caught. At their head rode a gray-haired man with the unmistakable bearing of authority. Even at this distance, Silas recognized the set of his shoulders, the way he sat his horse, as if the ground itself bent to him. Ayana whispered, "The governor." The barn fell silent again, but the silence was different now, uncertain, braced for something new. Aando's jaw clenched. His grip on the tomahawk didn't loosen, but his eyes narrowed with suspicion. Why would he come here himself? Silas's mouth had gone dry. He swallowed hard, forcing the words out. Because this isn't just about two women anymore. It's about all of us. And for the first time, he realized the truth. The battle he'd feared wasn't just for his ranch, or even for the sisters' freedom. It was for the story that would be told about this land, for who would own its future. The governor was coming to decide it. The white flag rippled faintly in the breeze as the three riders drew closer. Dust swirled around their horses' hooves, glowing golden in the morning light. Every Apache bowstring tightened. Every musket barrel lifted a fraction higher. Silas felt the air thrum with the potential for violence, like one wrong twitch could ignite the whole valley. The man in front swung down from his saddle with practiced ease. Age had silvered his hair, but authority straightened his spine. His coat was plain, but cut from expensive fabric, the brass buttons catching sunlight. Two federal marshals flanked him, their hands nowhere near their holsters, but ready all the same. When he spoke, his voice carried the clarity of a man accustomed to being heard. "Chief Aando, I am Governor Robert Washington." He paused, then let his eyes rest on Silas. "And I believe my nephew is in there with you." The words struck Silas harder than any bullet. His throat went dry. He'd heard rumors, whispers of family ties to territorial officials, but he'd never believed them. Now the governor himself stood 20 paces away, claiming blood kinship in front of 100 armed warriors. Aando stepped out from the barn shadows, towering, his tomahawk gleaming in the sun. "If you came for your nephew," he said in measured English, "you risked your life for nothing. He stays until I decide otherwise." Washington's pale blue eyes didn't flinch. "That choice is not yours alone. This land is boiling with lies and treachery, lies that have poisoned both your people and mine. I came because we all stand at the edge of slaughter, but slaughter serves only the men who profit from it." Ayana and Kiona stepped forward, wrists still bound, but voices steady. "He speaks truth, Chief," Ayana said. "We carry the proof. Letters from Colonel Martinez, contracts with Harrison Caldwell, documents showing they fed this fire to consume us both." Washington raised a leather folder from his coat. "And I carry the rest. Colonel Martinez is dead. Caldwell sits in irons in Santa Fe. Their conspiracy unraveled in my courts. What remains is the choice before us: peace or war." The barnyard went still. Even the horses seemed to sense the weight of the moment. Silas felt every eye shift toward him. To his shock, Washington wasn't finished. "And my nephew, unwittingly, has been the bridge. His reports from this valley, his quiet honesty, gave me the first threads of truth." Silas's knees wavered. He hadn't meant for his letters to be anything but weather notes, crop tallies, accounts of cattle, and scarce rainfall. But to hear the governor call them a bridge between nations, it made his solitude feel like it had mattered after all. Aando's voice broke the silence. "Words are wind. Treaties are ink. We have buried too many under both." His warriors rumbled in agreement, their distrust a living force. Washington's reply was steel-wrapped in calm. "Then let us craft one bound not just in ink, but in blood and honor. My word, your word, and the truth we now hold." The circle of warriors shifted uneasily. The moment of decision was at hand. The governor's words lingered in the charged air, hanging heavier than gun smoke after a firefight. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, Chief Aando's warriors shifted, their boots crunching dry grass, their eyes narrowing. A murmur rolled through the circle: distrust, anger, fear of being trapped. Aando's jaw was hard as granite. "You speak of treaties, Governor Washington, yet every paper signed has cut flesh from our people. Why should I trust you now?" Washington didn't flinch. He held the folder aloft. "Because the lies are written here, in men's own hands. This is not about Apache against settler. It is about Caldwell's greed, Martinez's ambition, and the corruption of officials who betrayed us both." He lowered his voice. "And because I came without soldiers, only truth and 2 marshals." The sisters exchanged a glance, their bound hands twitching. Ayana stepped forward. "Chief, the proof is real. Caldwell armed you to make you fight. The governor's own words." She looked at Silas. "And Silas's reports prove we were all meant to die, Apache and settler alike, so others could grow rich." Aando's warriors bristled. One shouted in Apache, his face twisted with fury. Silas didn't know the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Trap, betrayal, blood. Steel hissed as a blade cleared its sheath. Aando raised his tomahawk, not to strike, but to quiet his men. The silence returned, but it was a silence sharpened by violence barely leashed. Then Chaitan spoke. His young voice cracked like a whip across the standoff. "It's true. I sent word myself. Martinez's dealings, Caldwell's plans, the weapons, all of it. The governor has my records already." He looked at Aando, shame mixing with defiance. "I betrayed you, Chief, but only to stop the slaughter they planned for us all." Gasps rose. Several warriors turned on Chaitan, betrayal burning in their eyes. Aando's face was a mask of stone. "You spied on your own blood. I spied on the men who lied to you." Chaitan shot back, fists clenched. "Would you rather lead us into a war we could never win, or face the truth that they wanted us dead from the start?" The barn seemed to shrink. Washington's marshals shifted uneasily, their hands brushing the butts of their pistols. Silas's heart pounded. He could see the cliff edge beneath their feet. One wrong word, and the valley would erupt in blood. Washington's voice cut through like a rifle crack. "Enough. Chief Aando, look at your men. They are ready to die for you. But will they die for Caldwell's lies, or will they live for a future you can shape with your own hand?" The governor stepped closer, holding out the folder. His pale eyes burned. "Take the proof, hold it in your hands. See for yourself." Every warrior tensed. If Aando reached for the documents, the fragile balance might tip either way. Silas could barely breathe as the chief's massive hand hovered over the leather folder. Would he seize the truth, or unleash the storm? Chief Aando's hand closed around the leather folder, his fingers rough against the worn binding. For a long moment he didn't open it. Instead, he studied Washington, with the eyes of a man who'd seen too many promises shattered like brittle bones. Then, slowly, he unfolded the first document. Silas could see the words from where he stood. Lines of ink in Caldwell's hand, notations about rifles and ammunition shipments, references to Mexican intermediaries and expected Apache raids. Aando's jaw tightened as he read. His warriors leaned closer, trying to catch a glimpse. When he reached a passage signed by Harrison Caldwell himself, "Ensure hostilities increase. Justification for military intervention will follow." his face drained of color. Aando looked up, fury trembling in every line of his frame. They wanted to turn us into pawns, bait for their soldiers, bait for their minds. His voice rose. Every hunt, every raid, every battle, already decided before we even drew our bows. The warriors erupted in angry cries. Some shouted for vengeance on Caldwell and the territorial officials. Others demanded war anyway, claiming honor demanded it. The barn quaked with their voices. Washington raised his hand, but it was Silas who stepped forward first. You've seen the proof. You know the truth. But if we fight each other now, we hand Caldwell exactly what he wants. He wins, and we all lose. Ayana's dark eyes burned as she added, Chief, our people need more than blood. They need survival. They need a tomorrow. The barn fell quiet as Aando turned toward Chaitan. The young scout stood rigid, sweat shining on his brow. You brought this to them, Aando said coldly. You betrayed me. Chaitan didn't flinch. I betrayed your war, not our people. There's a difference. If you cannot see it, then you are already blind. Gasps rippled through the warriors. To challenge a chief so openly was nearly unthinkable. Aando's tomahawk flashed up, and for a heartbeat, Silas thought the blade would fall. Instead, the chief buried the edge deep into the wooden post beside Chaitan's head. The young warrior didn't move. Then prove it, Aando growled. Stand beside this rancher. Stand beside the governor. If their words are true, you will live. If they are false, you will die first when the soldiers come. The challenge hung in the air like thunder before a storm. Washington stepped forward. Chief, we can end this here. Caldwell is already in custody. Martinez is dead. The documents you hold will burn their conspiracy to the ground. But if we turn on one another now, we finish their work for them. For the first time, Aando's expression softened. He looked at his warriors, men ready to spill blood at his command, men who trusted him with their lives. He looked at Ayana and Kiona, fierce and unyielding even in ropes. And finally, he looked at Silas, the rancher who had no stake in this fight, but had chosen to stand anyway. The chief let out a slow breath. Very well, he said. We will not kill today. He pulled the tomahawk free from the post and slid it back into his belt. But words are not enough. If we walk this path, it must be tested. Washington inclined his head. Then test us. Aando raised the folder high, his voice booming. Tomorrow, at sunrise, we march together to Santa Fe, before every official, every settler, every warrior. Let the truth be spoken where no one can deny it. And the warriors answered with a roar, not of war, but of agreement. Silas's knees felt weak with relief. But deep inside, he knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The ride to Santa Fe stretched 3 tense days. Silas rode at the center, flanked by Ayana and Kiona. Behind them, 60 Apache warriors moved in silence, their war paint dulled, but their eyes sharp. Ahead, Governor Washington and his marshals led the way, carrying the documents that would either ignite a firestorm or extinguish one. Every mile, Silas felt the weight of history pressing on his shoulders. He wasn't just a rancher anymore. He was proof, a bridge between worlds, that ordinary men could matter in battles far larger than themselves. When they entered Santa Fe, the streets froze. Shopkeepers, soldiers, townsfolk, they all stopped and stared as the unlikely procession passed. 100 whispers followed. Apaches, with the governor, with a rancher. Fear, curiosity, disbelief, but no one dared interfere. The territorial courthouse loomed ahead, its adobe walls baked golden under the New Mexico sun. Inside, the air buzzed with the tension of 100 voices: settlers, tribal elders, officials. Commissioner Walsh presided, gavel in hand. But even he seemed uncertain how to manage what was coming. Washington entered first, laying the leather folder on the table before the council. "These are the documents taken from Harrison Caldwell and Colonel Martinez," he declared. "They prove beyond doubt that a conspiracy sought to arm Apache bands, provoke attacks, and justify military extermination, all for profit." Gasps rippled through the room. Walsh motioned for silence. "Chief Aando, will you speak?" The Apache chief stepped forward, shoulders squared, his painted face solemn. "We were told war was our only path. We prepared for it. But today, we stand here because truth matters more than blood. My people will not be pawns in another man's game." Ayana added, her voice steady. "We demand land that cannot be stolen, trade that cannot be manipulated, and peace that does not depend on lies." Then Silas rose. His throat felt dry, but his voice carried anyway. "I was no soldier, no politician, just a rancher trying to survive. But when 2 women came to my barn, I learned something. Courage isn't about fighting enemies. It's about protecting what's right, even if it costs you everything. These papers prove we were all betrayed. If we ignore them, more families, settler and Apache, will bury their dead for nothing." The room held its breath. Walsh turned to Washington. "Governor, what is your proposal?" Washington laid down a fresh parchment. "A new treaty, land boundaries corrected, mining revenues shared, legal protections for sacred sites, and recognition that the Apache are not enemies, but allies." The council erupted, half in outrage, half in relief. But when Walsh struck his gavel, the noise stilled. "By the authority vested in this court," he said, "this treaty will stand. Caldwell's crimes will be prosecuted. His false treaties are void. From this day forward, Apache and settler will walk a new path." Aando clasped Washington's hand. Ayana and Kiona untied their bindings, no longer captives, but free daughters of their people. Silas stood apart, overwhelmed, until Ayana touched his arm. "You gave more than shelter," she whispered. "You gave us tomorrow." Outside, the sun blazed high, spilling light across the plaza. For the first time, Silas felt it not as a burden, but as a promise. The rancher who once lived alone had become something more. Tonkala, brother, bridge, protector. And as the war cries of the past gave way to new beginnings, he knew this dawn was not just the end of one story, but the start of another.